For many Windsorites, Detroit isn't just a neighbor. It's the other half of a shared community. More than 40,000 people cross the Windsor-Detroit border every single day. We are joined here at the cafe by three people to talk about the city's relationship with Detroit and how it shapes Windsor's identity, especially in a moment like this. Reno Bortolin is a former Windsor City Councillor and a chef who owns Petrella's Italian street food here in Windsor's Ford City neighborhood. He's also a strategic advisor with the University of Windsor Centre for Cities. Tom Lucier is a longtime owner of the Fog Lounge. It is a popular live music venue in Windsor. And Jeanette Pierce was one of those people who crossed the border this morning. She's here from Detroit and repping it on her sweatshirt that says Detroit City. She is the founder of the City Institute in Detroit. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you all here. Reno, let's start with you. How would you describe your relationship with Detroit?
For me, it's as much intertwined as it is being Canadian. My mom immigrated to Detroit. My dad immigrated to Windsor, both from Italy. They met here. They dated on the streets of Detroit, going down Woodward to see Elvis at the Fox Theater. So for me, it's as much part of my growing up as most people have for their origin story of being a newcomer to this country. I'm a first-generation Canadian that sees as much home in Detroit as he does in Windsor. So crossing that border, I think it really put a spotlight on us during COVID when the border was closed and we realized just how much we missed it and relied on it.
You could see it right there, but you couldn't go.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, I joked, but I think Jeanette's drive here was shorter than mine today. So depending on where you live in the city, there's the access points. People don't realize how close it is. We pop out of that tunnel. We're downtown Detroit. So for all the obvious reasons, there's all the cultural aspects. We talk about going to concerts, going to shows, going to all the sports. But there's the connection with the people. I grew up with lots of family, aunts, uncles, great aunts, cousins, things like that. So it wasn't. This border was almost just, this toll you pay on the way through, and that's it.
What about for you, Tom? I mean, people talk about this idea of living in a couple of places at the same time and that they blur the border. What does the border mean to you?
Oh, it's blurred for me. The border to me is just a line on the map. It's not really much more than that for me because I'm parroting Reno. My entire life has been memories on both sides. I mean, my parents taking us over to have a different relationship than I have with the city now, which was kind of what I feel like the relationship is for most people in Windsor, which is shopping, going to concerts, going to sporting events, and then coming right back. That was the old experience I had, which has transformed with a lot of effort on my part.
I mean, you do this. You take people from here across the border to show them Detroit.
Yeah, it's
and
like
Detroit they might not know.
Yeah, it's this mystery, because it's right there, and we hear about it a lot. It's in our socials, but there's a blind spot even for people who do live here that don't experience it the way I try to make my friends experience it.
What do you show them?
Well, since I'm a dive bar owner, I like taking them to places where, like, real human beings, ground-level Detroiters...
Real human beings.
...live. And, not the shiny parts of the city. Even when I take people over there, we don't even get out of the east side of Detroit. We will spend 6.5, 7 hours stopping at the Heidelberg Project, for instance, which is this incredible outdoor art display, I would call it. And it's not just about going and having drinks. It's about stopping at the side of the road on Mount Elliott to meet our friends and pick up barbecue. And you're pulling over next to a cemetery in East Detroit, and people are like, what are we doing? And it's like, we're going to eat. We're going to eat right here. That smoking box? Yep, that's what we're doing. And other Detroiters are pulling up behind you and next to you, and you're having conversations. That's the experience I want to have. I want to meet real people there, and I want people in Windsor to meet those real people there. It's just a better experience as a Windsorite and a Canadian knowing them, period.
Jeanette, you're on the other side of the river. And, I said the sweatshirt, but I did not notice the earrings with the big D on it for the Detroit Tigers. Tell me about your relationship and how people in your city view this city, view Windsor.
Yeah, so it did take me. I took a photo when I was at the light before going into the tunnel, even paying the toll, and then I took it after the tunnel, the toll, and customs, and it was literally 5 minutes.
5 minutes from get to one country to another.
Yes. And that's with stopping and paying a toll, talking to somebody, telling them where I'm going, all that stuff. We have such a great city that I'm always talking about, and for a long time I had to remind people that Detroit has always been a great city, but one of the things that makes us great is our proximity to Windsor. We get two countries for the price of one, right? And it's so close, and there's so many, there's a lot of similarities that bring us together, but there's also just enough differences that make it so interesting and why would you go there if we have that here? Well, guess what? We don't have that here.
So you do that as well. You bring people from Detroit over here.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you show them? What are the differences? Give me something that you can get here that you wouldn't be able to get over there.
So, it's about the people. So we always want to make sure we talk to, same thing, have a Windsor guide, right? Like, I'm not going to be the storyteller of a place that's, right, that I'm not necessarily from. But the best thing that I always talk about, literally, I'll be like, people, have you been to Windsor lately? And it's the soup dumplings.
Soup dumplings.
At Shanghai Bistro. And, the Xiaolong Bao, I don't know if you know, the soup is in the dumpling.
Yeah.
We don't have it in Michigan.
There's no soup dumplings in Michigan?
Heard of it. I was like, I literally didn't even know it existed. And 99% of the people I tell, have you had this? And they go, no. And I talked to some folks in our Chinese community, and actually some folks in Chinatown, San Francisco, when I was doing some work with them. And it's because it's a northern, we have more people from, the Cantonese, area and the South. And so that's literally something I will call, for my birthday lunch, I came across to Windsor to get soup dumplings.
Love it. We have seen the surge in patriotism in the last week. How does that land here in a community like Windsor, do you think? I mean, the people have taken a lot of pride in their country and wrapped themselves in the flag in the wake of this.
We have. I think we need to be careful because it also has turned into, for example, booing the national anthem.
What do we need to be careful of when it comes to that? Because, again, there are a lot of people who are like, yeah, boo that anthem.
Well, you're throwing away, hundreds of years of friendship and hundreds of years of connection because of the few stupid actions of one idiot. So, to be blunt. So we need to be careful we know that all the governors, all the senators of all these states are calling every day, telling them not to do these tariffs. It's just a really stupid idea, and we can't take it out on the people. As much as, months ago, we were celebrating the success of the Detroit Lions here. The mayor raised the Detroit Lions flag at City Hall to then come out and say, we don't want you going to Detroit to spend any money there. That's not how we should be looking at it.
Has that closeness in that relationship been tested in the last week, do you think?
Oh, I think so. There are people like us that I think will do the same things, but I think a lot of people in Windsor have said, okay, I'm not going over to Detroit for the next month or next few months until this settles. But I think they're missing the point, and I think a lot of those people don't fully understand the relationship. The relationship, as Tom said, it was like they go over for shopping, they go over for the things that benefit them only. Whereas if there's a reciprocal aspect to it, you realize that a lot of attention has been on Detroit over the last 10 years. But if you're from here, you actually see some of the amazing things happening on the ground floors. It's not just about these billionaires pouring money into a city. The people of the city have been unbelievably resilient and innovative and creative.
And you worry that those people are being targeted by some of the, say, anti-Americanism, but the way that anger is being directed.
Yeah, and to be honest, on their side, it won't hurt them as much. I always compare it, they're the super cool older cousin or older brother of ours. So if the pesky little brother doesn't come around, they won't care. A lot of Jeanette's friends won't notice that Canadians are not coming over. But I think for us, and I think for the general health of this area, Windsor is as much intertwined with Detroit, and not just about the economic. Our auto park goes over 11 times across the border, but for everything, for the creativity, for that arts, for that culture, for the soup dumplings.
You were nodding as he was saying all of that. When you hear that anger, you hear it at the hockey rink, you hear it at the basketball games, but you also see it as well. How does that strike you?
I was shocked to hear my customers having that patriotism, that bite back reaction. Like, I've got a free throw contest to win in Detroit on Saturday
I was playing there
at my
till-
favorite bar, and I am going to win. But
what, I mean, what's
I
wrong-
can't
what's-
believe that. Like, I felt like I was taking heat from my contemporaries here, that I still have this extreme interest and love for the people that I know over there. I messaged a bunch of my friends. These are people I care about, telling them that we were going to do this today and what their thoughts were. And they just said, kind of collectively, the border and one person or a collection of people can't stop, the love we have for each other. No, we don't get to see you as often as we'd like, but they still value those relationships. One of my favorite things to ask my new Detroit friends, people when I meet them, is, how often do you think of Windsor? And they go, what are you even talking about? What kind of question is that? And I say, well, I probably think about Detroit 50 times a day. How many times are you going to turn your eyes to Detroit while you're in town for this? You're going to see Detroit and think about it that many times. Plus whatever is in my social media feed. It's all the sports teams. It's all of that. I got an actual message today from my friend in Detroit, and she said, like, proudly, I think of Windsor maybe once every week or two. That's a very different way that we think of one another. We have this enormous dependency and love for the people there, but it does take a little bit more effort on our side. So it's not an exact same relationship, but it's super valuable to me regardless of that lopsidedness.
I want to talk to the American here in a moment, but how do you unscramble that idea that people feel pride in their country, but part of that pride perhaps is leading them to, say, I'm going to buy here, and we're not going to visit the United States. We're not going to go down there. That they are represented by somebody that we take offense to, and so it's a collective kind of sense of anger. How do you take that apart?
It's exactly the way people have relationships with different customers of mine. Sorry to boil it down, but people who are like, how do you stand that guy? It's like, I have to take the best of every customer I have. It doesn't mean that I'm best friends with every single one of them, so I can't look at somebody who wants to be, selective and not go or choose where they're going to spend their money and tell them they're wrong, because people have different relationships with even people or countries. Mine is really intimate. It's much different than most people. So it stinks. I really don't want that for them. I'm trying to bring people over there to give them the human side, have them meet their contemporaries over there, and this whole mess is messing with that.
Jeanette, you're the American here at the table. How do you make sense of what is an anti-American sentiment that people often in this country will define themselves as not being from the United States, but that's become sharper in the last few days.
Well, there's a couple things. Detroit has always we're used to people being like, well, we're not Detroit. That was the thing. It was like, oh, how far are you from Detroit was how people would say. And now everybody a little bit more wants to be like connected to Detroit. So we're kind of used to people like being not caring that much about us or putting us in the doghouse. And that is when the people and the relationships do matter the most, right? And I guess one thing that just popped in my head was like, the problem about getting, extra nationalism and being anti other countries is kind of how we got into this mess in the first place.
What do you mean?
I feel like, right? This whole us and, we only care about us.
We don't need your stuff.
And we it's like, it goes all the way back to, Germany, right? You have there's a slippery slope when you start to, or a negative side to a nationalism and really against everybody else kind of thing. But I also understand it. Right? So this is the thing. Detroit is not we're more with you guys, right? Like look at, if you want to get into like who Detroiters voted for, right? And our president does not like Detroit.
But a lot of people around Detroit voted for him. Again, when we were in Dearborn and other places like that, a lot of folks, people in the auto sector who were supporting Donald Trump, who said this is going to bring the jobs back to I just wonder how, what the future of that relationship is given the last week. What are you worried about?
I think, again, all the financial, domino effects, absolutely. And we care about the small businesses here, and we care about the tomatoes coming over, and I think, and this is kind of one of the bigger issues as well, is that people in Detroit, and Michigan and America to some extent, to your point, they might not think about Canada all the time, but I think they would notice, right? They are going to notice when, like, I drove a Pacifica here. I passed the plant that I got my van. I have triplets. I need a Pacifica, man, and I don't want to, I'm already, I was already paying a lot for it. And now, so I think people are going to notice, and even if they don't realize it. Yeah. And one last thing before because only 1/3 of America voted for our president. Okay. 1/3 voted for a president, 1/3 voted for the other person, and 1/3 didn't vote. Right? So it seems like this majority, but there's more of us that are frustrated and scared than not.
Reno, I'm going to let you all go. And I mean, there's a big breakfast menu here, so people might want to eat as well. But there are real concerns about the economic health of this community. And it's the agriculture, it's the auto sector, it's the threats of those kind of tariffs coming in. What worries you most about the future of this town? Or are you worried?
I think, unfortunately, we're a little bit used to it. The boom and bust of the auto sector has prepared us. We've gone through these boom and bust cycles, including, COVID most recently. So we're a little bit used to it. But I think what worries me is sort of this new idea of nationalism that changes, where we now are starting to focus elsewhere, that would change that relationship with Detroit. So just looking at that specifically, we will come out of this with new trading partners, with new trade deals with, whether it's the EU or other organizations.
But you're going to live next door to the United States no matter what.
Exactly. I have season tickets to the Detroit City soccer team. I don't want it to be where I can't go see those games. I don't want it to be where all of a sudden they do something stupid like we need a visa to visit, or you need a visit or a visa to do any work there. We want this to be a seamless area. I say this all the time. Mm-hmm. This is one of the best urban environments in the country to live in, except for maybe Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. And I still would compete with them because of that proximity and because of that relationship. So when we talk about how great it is to be Canadian here, it's so great to be Canadian here because we have Detroit so close.
It's good to have you all here. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Safe trip back across the border. It'll probably take you less time to do that than it'll take us to get back to our hotel. Reno Bortolin is a former Windsor City Councillor, owner of Petrella's Italian Street Food here in Windsor's Ford City neighborhood. Tom Lucier is a longtime owner of the Fog Lounge. It's a live music venue here in Windsor. And Jeanette Pierce came from Detroit to talk with us. She is the founder of the City Institute in Detroit, joining us here at the Backroad Cafe in Windsor. The city of Windsor is one of Canada's most diverse cities. And for the black community here, the roots go back to the 1800s. Windsor played a crucial role in the Underground Railroad, helping black families escape slavery and come to Canada. Irene Moore Davis is assistant curator of the Amherstburg Freedom Museum, president of the Essex County Black Historical Research Society, and she's here with us in the cafe as well. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
This is a personal story for you. Tell me about your family's connection to Windsor and how your family got here.
So many of my ancestors came here through the Underground Railroad and have been here since the early 19th century. They came from Greene County, North Carolina. They came from Mason County, Kentucky. They came from Frankfort, Kentucky, and other places, and made their way here with dire circumstances. And there are many descendants around.
How closely are you tied to the city of Detroit? We've just been talking about how people's lives in many ways overlap with that city, that it is as integrated as you could possibly imagine. What about it for your family?
I think that for a lot of families, regardless of ethnicity here, there are tons of connections to Metro Detroit. But for Black community members especially, it's very rare that we don't have tons of relatives in the D. And
the D.
Yeah. I mean, truthfully, for me, I have way more blood relatives at this point in Metro Detroit than I do in Essex County, just because of the way that populations flow, the way that people moved across to seek better opportunities, and so on. I just came back not long ago from my cousin's 60th birthday party in Farmington Hills. I mean, this is just a very normal thing, and we do really think of ourselves as a transnational group of people.
How then has the last week and a bit, but it's not just the last week and a bit, as everyone's been saying, this has kind of been hanging over this community for a long time. How has that impacted that relationship?
This is really one of very few times in my life that I've had a sense of an actual border. 9/11 was one of those times. The pandemic when the border was closed was one of those times. And now is one of those times when people just aren't as comfortable crossing and being together necessarily.
Can you explain that? Because I think a lot of people perhaps outside of this community would say, I mean, it's a border. Of course it's a border. And when you cross the border, there are things you need to do. There are things you need to have. You never really thought about that.
I mean, if you grow up in Windsor and Essex County, it doesn't really feel like a border. This is a place where, for many of us growing up, our rites of passage happened mostly in Metro Detroit. All of those fun things that we did when we were coming of age and just flashing a birth certificate was all you needed to do to get there. There are moments in world history when that border becomes a border. After 9/11, things became much stricter for a while. During the pandemic, it was actually shut down. And now there's a sense of, something lost once again. I literally had a message last week from a dear friend from Detroit who said, given the fact that our two countries are at war, I probably won't be crossing as often. I had to explain we're not actually at war.
But that says something.
But it does say something, and people have that sense. I mean, for us as family members, I don't think that we're going to allow this to stop us from being together. Our family reunions happen on either side of the border, often alternating, and we're just, we're always connected. And it's funny, I was listening to Tom in the last interview talk about how people in Detroit don't think of Windsor that often, but, for our family members, they think of it all the time. I mean, we really recite to one another all the time our origin story. We're very keenly aware of the family stories, the ancestral stories. We all talk about them regardless of whether our cousins have grown up in Michigan or here.
So what would you want the rest of the country to know about these ties? Again, one of the reasons we came down here is because something has happened in the last week, and how people think of that border is different now. Maybe they're worried about what might be coming, but they're also thinking about their relationship with the United States. What would you want the rest of the country to know about this relationship and where it might go in future?
I think that we have to be keenly aware that there are forces that seek to divide us, and we have to make sure that we're doing the necessary things to safeguard our economy. But we should not allow this to cultivate any kind of hatred or division between people.
Are you worried about that? We've used this phrase, anti-Americanism. I mean, there's a pro-Canadian sentiment, but it can lead to an anti-Americanism or defining yourself because you're not somebody else. Are you worried about that?
I think that there's always a piece of Canadian culture that's about seeing ourselves in binary terms as in contrast to the United States. It is, for example, why we sometimes deny the existence of racism here, because we're always thinking, well, we're not like those people over there. But I think that, it's really important that we don't allow ourselves to fall into those easy definitions, and that we have to understand that, most American people are good people and we've got to keep working alongside them. And understanding that these are integrated economies, that there are socio-cultural ties that are undeniable, and we've got to keep nurturing those, especially in a border region like this one. It's so important that we don't let those relationships go.
Who are you thinking about when you talk about that? Is there like one person or a group of people specifically that you're thinking about?
I mean, I'm always thinking about these people. They're the people with the good recipes and the people that show me the good new dances and all of that stuff.
Glad to have you here. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks so much.
Irene Moore-Davis is Assistant Curator of the Amherstburg Freedom Museum and the President of the Essex County Black Historical Research Society. And she joined us here in the Back Road Cafe to talk about those ties and the very personal ties between Windsor and Detroit. Whenever you visit a city, it is a smart idea to ask, this is the first thing often I will do, what's good to eat here? The city is home to a growing Middle Eastern community, and we were directed to Sham Sweets, which is owned by the Haboob family. They came to Canada as refugees from Syria, walked over the border from the United States into Canada in 2017. Mohammed Amir and his wife, Hanadi Amiralty, and their sons became Canadian citizens last year. They proudly call Windsor home. And this place, Sham Sweets, welcomes customers from Windsor and from Detroit looking for their crazy good baklava. He says crazy good baklava because he had some last night, and it was delicious. One of those customers was just walking in as our producer, Joanna Jergici, got in.
Can I order a pound of baklava? This pistachio, and this is cashew with black coffee, very delicious.
I'm so Macona. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
So nice to meet you.
Me too. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. I make sweets. This baklawa, 5 hour I make this baklawa every day. I came to Canada before 8 years ago. Somebody tell me Windsor, the weather is very beautiful.
Windsor is good for start life. When I arrived to Canada, to Windsor, after maybe 2 months, and open business. I open small store. And after 1 year, go to other store, bigger.
And now your sons are working here?
Yeah, I have 3 sons.
My name is Abdul Malik Habub. We are really happy and enjoying living in Canada, especially in Windsor. And it's like on the border with the US, we live between 2 countries. That's mean more like a mixed culture. And we can sometimes get supplies from US. And sometimes we go there to enjoying the weekend. I feel really welcome here, and very easy to see to meet friends and new friends, because Wyandotte Street here, everywhere you can see the signs on Arabic. That's mean we have a lot of Arabic community, so we have a lot of friends.
With all the talk about the uncertainty, the tariffs, people being afraid of losing their jobs here, have you felt that in the community?
Yes, I feel that. Yeah, I feel that, and I feel everyone has fear, and they just thinking about in the future what we have to do if that's happened. We are a neighbor in the end. We have to stand together and to live together. That's the point.
So you guys are still getting ready because you've expanded, right? So you're still putting some stuff up.
Yeah, I want to make Arabic coffee in the corner, and beautiful design for the walls. I will make it a historic design for walls, like a Damascus design. We are the new generation, and the grandfather gave us this. Not anyone can make a baklava. It's we have a special way to make it. We make everything handmade. I feel that's feeling that I want to share taste of baklava to not just my country. I want to share it also in Canada and US. So to make not just one sweet shop. I want to make 1 and 2 and 3 everywhere in Canada. I want to make that's a culture of a Middle Eastern sweets. Is my grandfather work. I have to follow it.